Hi everyone, my name's Will. I'm chillywillies. I'm a content creator on Twitch, and I've put together some really smart people that are a lot smarter than me. Some of them, I swear, they have like 3 PhDs. I don't know how they learned what they learned, but it's pretty great. So we're gonna pick their brains and see what we come up with. So I'm gonna let them introduce themselves.
Is this on? Yeah. I'm Stephen O'Connell. I'm from Navigraph, Stockholm, Sweden.
Andrew Heath from Positive Control, the new network. We're not released yet, but I'm from Philadelphia.
I'm Kevin Menard from Old Prep Solutions from Montreal, Canada, or Toronto, depending on who you ask.
I'm Bill Womack. I'm the owner of iBlue Yonder Studios and the lead, or not the lead, the senior developer with Orbex.
And I'm Saso. I'm with Hotstart, developer of the TBM, and working on a Challenger now. And I'm from Slovakia.
Oh, never mind. Okay, so I'm going to start off with something from kind of Developer Month. You guys might remember that FSLE did a thing called Developer Month, but I think it's kind of a good segue. So what motivates you guys to do your work and keep you going? Whoever. Just jump in.
Start. So I'm primarily by training a software engineer, but I have an extreme passion for aviation. So I guess it was just a natural progression to combine the two together. I used to work in completely a different software development environment, but since then I've transitioned over to combining my passion for software, for making software, and for aviation, I guess.
Honestly, I've been doing this for about 17 years now, doing scenery design, and I can't think of anything else I'd rather do. I try to imagine sometimes something else that would be more interesting, more fulfilling, more challenging. Haven't come up with anything yet, so I just get up every morning and keep doing it.
I'm kind of the opposite of that. Sometimes I just go and start thinking in the shower. I'm like, well, it wouldn't be cool to have that. What's already existing is not super nice from what I like, and I'm like, okay, let's try to draft something up and come up with something, and then you end up with chase blame, right? So I just start coding, and it just keeps going. I forget about eating, I forget about sleeping, and then you end up with a product. So it's kind of good for me, but I can't stay still. I just can't stay still. I do visual effects, I do camera systems, and something else, who knows? But yeah, that's what motivates me. Yeah, and the feedback, obviously. Just coming here, I learn more about myself and the product that I make, and what I should be doing, than what I would think. So people give me feedback, and that's awesome.
So my profession is an airline pilot, and to come home, I de-stress by controlling on online networks. And which seems really weird, but that's what I do. But so I come home, and I've been doing that for 20 years, and I wanted something better, something that was more realistic. So I decided to create my own network, and I've been doing that for the last year and a half. It's been a lot of work, but it's fun. It's a good experience. So.
For me, it's the feedback we get from all the users through this event, from forums, from just talking, getting feedback, and understanding what features are important, and delivering those, and hearing comments, and just progressing from there. I mean, this is really driving me and everybody at Navigraph forward, and it's great.
All right, so you guys were talking about how you come to events like this and you come up with ideas for improvement. So how has your relationship with the community evolved over time, and how has it changed your development process?
Well, for Hotstart, we were always kind of pretty heavily community driven. So when I started the first project that we were working on, I was pretty, there was a time of secrecy of maybe 3 or 4 months afterwards, it pretty much got announced, and it was just being developed sort of in the open, so everybody knew what was going on. The community is extremely valuable in that they provide feedback when they see something that's wrong, especially early in development. They can provide a lot of positive info and what to be changed, what needs to be added. It's just when you're developing a product in a vacuum, you sort of insulate yourself from, then you can sort of put yourself in an echo chamber, especially if you got multiple people talking to you, where they can just turn into a bunch of yes men and just driving you in a bad direction. You end up somewhere where you just don't want to be. So community interaction for me is absolutely super duper important straight from day one of development. When somebody says they want feature X in a product, then like, who am I to disagree? I can have a vision, but if a lot of people think that what I'm doing is wrong, I just got to change it, because it's really ultimately about making people happy, I guess.
You know, I can relate to the whole developing in a vacuum thing, because that's where I spend, honestly, about 95% of my time, sitting at home in my own office with no one else around. But events like these are really invaluable, because I know I came back last year from the Expo with all kinds of great feedback, features people wanted in my products, new areas they wanted covered, airports that I hadn't really considered. And they gave me some great ideas, and some of those are even kind of becoming set in stone as part of a product roadmap for the next couple years. So the community is invaluable, and I love them. I mean, this is a really great community, so I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Where do I start? The community, in terms of developing a product, I think is the most valuable and most underused thing there is in this community right now. Chaseplane was developed from the start to be released as an early access product. We did that. A lot of early access early access is not well seen from most people, because usually what happens is they start developing it and then they abandon it, and people paid for it. They paid for a complete product. So Chaseplane was kind of released in a very early stage with a very clear intention of it being developed with the community. And the result was absolutely incredible. And the feedback that was provided from the community and the changes that we've made according to those feedback is just absolutely incredible. And I can't think today of a way to develop the product without involving the community from the start at a very early stage. Because naturally, the progression with those feedback, you'll end up with a good product if you follow what the community feels is right and what the majority is voicing. So, yeah, community is a great, great thing.
Every idea or feature that we've come up with at Positive Control is an idea or feature that somebody else has suggested. I mean, with the community, we're trying to create a community with Positive Control. So you basically have to listen to them and figure out what the pain points are for users and try to solve those issues. It's actually quite interesting to try to solve an issue and to see how can we make it the most realistic as possible. Can we automate it? If we can automate it, we eliminate a lot of unnecessary work, busy work by people. So everything's community driven. It's so important for us, at least.
So Navigraph started out from actually being a request from the community, which we touched on yesterday for those who attended the Captain's Corner. This was like a request that came into the SAS flight support group where we were doing other work. So initially, the community was like the kickstart for Navigraph. But then early on, we didn't even have a forum. We weren't that exposed to the community the first years. Then this has really evolved over the years, and now the community is like the center core of what we do. From the community survey that we did the last few years. Last year we had 15,000 respondents responding to various questions, 77 questions regarding various aspects. We hope this attendance will be even higher this year when we do this. When we do beta testing, we invite pretty much everyone that wants to be involved. We had over 5,000 users testing our latest apps. So the community is really at the essence of Navigraph.
Yeah, so you guys are talking a lot about like early access, and so something that I'm interested to hear your thoughts on is when do you think something is ready for the public to get their hands on it, and do you think early access is effective, and why is it effective or why is it not effective, depending on like your circumstances, right? Because you're all doing different things.
I think early access is good in terms of if you're clear what this really is and what is expected from the user and from the app itself or what you're testing. Absolutely. I mean, early feedback to know that this is in the right direction or this is good to go is definitely a good way.
I'm a new kid on the block here, so I'm kind of going off of what other people have done in the past, and I'm hoping that we added a managed release plan so that people could have access to our software earlier than just opening the floodgates, because we're not prepared to open the floodgates, and I think that going by Navigraph and various other companies, the way they've released things in the past, that's kind of what we're trying to model off of, so that we don't get into a point where we're opening up and we can't support issues that are arising. It's really a staffing thing too, to make sure that we can to solve those issues as they pop up. So
I think it's kind of simple. If you have less than 10 tickets a day, you're good for release. Very simple. If you have a public early access beta and you have a lot of people using it, if you see that the amount of bug reports that's coming in is very manageable, I mean, you have a stable product. Essentially, that's what it means. So you just go and release.
I think a lot of it comes down to intent with an early access product. And I'm speaking, of course, only in my little realm of scenery add-ons mostly. You don't see a lot of early access for good reason, I think. But I've seen people release products that I felt like were sort of rushed to get them out the door so that they could make enough money to keep developing it, which is not the best motivation, I think, to do it. And that's where you get a lot of things that get abandoned after the early access before they're actually complete. But on the other hand, the most recent product that I worked on with Portland International, we knew that we weren't going to be able to provide the airport in its actual current 2019 state when we released, because it had just barely finished construction on some new features. There were no photographs available to us at the time. And so I had to kind of make a call. It's like, okay, we have the airport in its 2017, 2018 configuration, looking good, working well, more or less bug-free. Do we release that and then update it as time goes on? And we decided to do that just because not only do you get a product that we feel like you could enjoy now, but you buy something and then later on you get more goodies. You get things added on as they get updated. And I think that actually ends up being a positive. Is that early access? I don't know. Technically, maybe not, but it's the same idea.
I think a scenery is always a bit early access, right? And it's in its form, because following up to real life is a constant struggle, right? Google Earth has been doing it for over a decade now. They're not done. They're still early access.
Yeah. I mean, you could chase your tail forever with it and never be done, and that's the glory of it, I guess.
Yeah, so for early access, it really, I would tie on to what Bill said, is really it's about the motivator for why a developer does early access. If they're doing it to catch bugs or get a little bit of extra exposure, sure, for that kind of point, we can totally see early access. And it's really, for software projects, getting a sort of, I'd say a good approach is a staged release cycle, essentially. You might call that early access, in that, say, for instance, we can have 10, 20 testers, but if everybody there has powerful hardware or has a particular sort of slant to their configurations, we might not be able to catch all these sort of corner cases. So I can totally see doing a couple hundred people in sort of a limited early access. But yeah, if the motivation is just to make money and just to keep the software house going, then something else is wrong with the software house. Something needs to be looked at. Why your finances are not working out? Why you are not able to actually finish the project on your own? But yeah, for testing purposes, I totally see early access as a good thing in a limited scope, not just to throw it out there as an incomplete product and to just abandon it.
The weird thing with early access and developing with a big, kind of a public early access is you can have 1,000 users using a product. No issue, you're good, go for release. The 1,001st user will have an issue.
I mean, you always are going to find those unlucky guys who are just, you're going to have 100 people, no issue whatsoever, and then one guy comes along and he just steps into it on every single step. His machine will crash, it'll blue screen, it'll do something different, something weird, the stars are not going to align right, and he just has issues.
I think that's universal.
Pretty much every software project has seen that.
So what do you guys think is a skill that you could take from either past work, if you came into flight simulation like from another career, or just that you've learned as a developer that is helpful?
Well, it really depends on the type of project that you're working on, right? Because if you're working on scenery, you want to be an artist. You want to have the sort of feel for color or for composition, or an eye for detail and visual in the visual department. If you're working on an aircraft add-on, if you're working, again, as an artist or a sound designer, you want to have a good sort of background in the respective field. If you're doing software, I mean, the best approach is to already be a software developer in the first place, right? So if you have, 10, 20 years of software development under your belt, then, doing software add-ons for a simulator is really no different than doing it for any other project. That's at least fundamentally. Of course, the best way is to have like gaming development experience, because then you're used to real-time programming and that kind of stuff. But I'd say it's really nothing special in flight sim than it is for any other sort of software vending field. You just got to know what you're going to be doing, and if you don't know it yet, there's tons of tutorials out there. So just go wild and learn.
It's less a matter of specific skills sometimes than just an inclination. Like, I started off as a photographer way back eons ago, and so I got all these photo skills, and they transferred to digital photo skills, and I had a lot of web development experience, and that led to art, strong art skills, but also a familiarity with code and with coding, not hardcore programming, but certainly being able to work with XML files and things, and all of that stuff kind of feeds into the skill set. So having an artistic and a technical bent put together is really ideal for a lot of aspects of this hobby, I think.
I learned programming specifically to build my products. I didn't know nothing about it. I was doing very basic web design, web stuff, and then the way I look at things, when I want to do something, when I have an idea on what I want to do, I start to break it down and take the required steps to get there. So I got good at programming. I'm still bad at administration, so I'm still late on my taxes. But I do great software. So you win, you lose, right? But it's all about what you want to do and taking the steps to get there. And in that term, I learned how to program. I'm very happy I did, actually.
So I'm not a programmer, I'm just the manager, but I started online networks 20 years ago when I was 16, and I think that having the experience of working with and being an administrator on those has really helped me. The airline pilot thing actually helps a lot, but it's more like I did a lot of sector development and SOP development through my time online. I think that actually has really helped me to understand what people are used to seeing, what they want to see, and hearing the feedback over those 20 years has been invaluable. But that's really what I think has helped me the most is listening to people and trying to solve the pain points. The airline pilot thing is helping because I can say, well, that's not how we do it in the real world. Let's see what we can do to make it more realistic.
I was just going to chime in. Well, you say hopefully not, because I flew into Tampa and it was a flight sim newbie level plunk, like all 3 gears coming down at the same time. I was wondering like what airline I was on for a minute, but.
Are you talking about the holding that was going on?
No. I was already in, but just like we came in and it was really hard. It was a really hard landing, and so I was just.
It happens. I was holding, which is very interesting. I think a lot of people love the holding online, which is funny because I mean, we actually make more money if we hold, so don't tell anybody. But, you know, I think a lot of people love that interaction of holding and having that realistic experience of a airport closing down is very fun sometimes. People like it. In the real world, they try to solve that by having a ground delay, absorbing the delay on the ground at the airport, but people don't like that online. They want to get it going, have a bunch of fuel, and just hold. So it's interesting.
For me, I'm not even a simmer, I'm not even a pilot, but I'm running Navigraph. The core, or the important part, is to try to assemble a team, because it's very, very hard to have knowledge about every aspect of a product you're making. Front end, back end, concepts, sales, management, support. I mean, you try to be good at everything, but it's very hard. So if possible, find people that you like to work with that are good at, everyone is good at different things. And the combination, the constellation, it's really 1 + 1 is more than 2. So this is what we're doing in Navigraph.
Okay, so we're going to kind of switch gears a bit. So what are you guys excited about for Sims that you think is coming soon or in the future? So, like, what do you think is an innovation or something that will happen in a major flight sim platform, or both, or many, or however many there are, right, that is going to be really important to a lot of people that you're excited about?
I think VR is definitely coming more and more. This is something that we're excited about. I think, I mean, Navigraph, we're not really tied to any platform, so we're really adapting to whatever is happening and adjusting to any mode that the simmer is using to interact. So VR is coming. We started supporting some virtual EFBs to do this. Apart from this, we're running standalone apps. So we're not really looking forward to some paradigm shift or so. It won't really change how we work. We're closely following and monitoring what's happening, of course.
I think web browsers, accessing a web browser in the sim is something that I would like to see. I think X-Plane had considered it. I know that Flight Factor has one in the Airbus. I'd like to see more of those because our web UI actually is accessible through any mobile device. And if you could pull that up, you could just, in VR, you could just look over at your EFB and control your connection status, CPDLC and radios and all sorts of different things. I think there's some security issues they're working through, I've heard. And controlling scenery in a simulator real time, X-Plane can do it. I'm not sure about P3D, but we could turn off lights and turn on lights and turn on brightness. That would be really cool for a controller to do.
I think there are multiple avenues where this could go. Depending on what field you're in, you'll use different simulators. For training, you'll use VR. For home simulation, VR is fine. I do think that you can make a lot of fun. You can have a lot of fun with VR, but I think if you're making a long haul for 8 hours, VR is not the thing. So P3D X-Plane still, I think, is kind of the most important platform for those specific purposes. You have Aerofly, you want to do VR. You have in-browser sims kind of becoming a thing too. We've seen Google announce a cloud solution for games. Obviously, P3D or X-Plane is not on there, but eventually, you know, it's something that people can entertain. It could be something that's self-hosted somewhere, and you don't even have a load time, and perfect frame rates all of the time. Another thing is ray tracing. Who wants ray tracing? I woke a few people up in the room. One day it'll come to our sim. That day will be incredible, especially for scenery developers and aircraft developers. So there's a lot of avenues it could go, but like it's really too early to tell where that's going to be, right? At the previous Expo a few years ago, I think we had a very similar question, and the result was, we still don't know. It's completely different from whatever was discussed back then, and it's going to be different in 5 years than what we're talking about right now.
I want to say that VR is going to be important, and I think it will be at some point. I'm one of those people. I would absolutely love to believe in it. I would love to experience it right now in the way that I was hoping it would be, and have it be like a life-changing experience. I have an Oculus Rift at home that I got after the Expo, or a previous show several years ago, that shall not be named, and it's exciting. You put it on for the first time, and you can look all around, and you feel like you're in that world. It's really immersive. Down to the point where about 20 minutes in, and I've got a raging headache, and I feel vaguely nauseated, and it's just hardware limitations. Everything is a little crunchy looking in the view. It's not very high res. I can't quite make out the needles on my gauges. These things are all changing, and I imagine in a couple of years this will be funny to look back on because it'll be so amazing.
You still can't drink your coffee while you have that on your head either.
You cannot. No, I don't recommend it.
So.
But that's one of those sort of big picture areas that I'm sure there'll be a lot of improvement in, and could potentially be a game changer. But honestly, most of the stuff that I'm excited about is stuff that would put most people to sleep. I would love better mesh editing tools. That would make me so happy. And I would love if PBR were more strictly adhered to and were more full featured in both the major platforms. And I know these are all things that are being worked on. There are things that will make my life easier. My life is not your average simmer's life, and probably you should be very thankful for that.
Yeah, so what I'm most excited about is really a trend that's been going on for, pretty much as long as computing has been around, which is the continuous exponentially increasing computational performance that we have, especially the stuff that we're getting in GPUs these days. Because my dream is that everybody has a 60-core machine that can shade 1 trillion triangles with any kind of complicated shader that I'm throwing at it, because that really is a lot of the limitation that we have when developing aircraft add-ons, is we pretty much have to cut the thing down to the lowest common denominator. We have to look at our market and say, okay, we're going to serve 90% of those, and so what's the lowest hardware that 90% of people have? And that's pretty much where we go. Now, there are things you can do in terms of like scaling performance, but ultimately, I want to be able to do your in-flight entertainment system back in the cabin, but that's a separate computer effectively in the real world. But if your machine has enough horsepower to draw every blade of grass, why not? I'm gonna draw an entertainment system in the back, and I'm gonna draw separate synthetic vision systems on the main avionics, and I'm gonna do basically everything I can to stress out as much of that hardware as I can. Now in X-Plane, these days they're working on Vulkan integration, so that's going to unlock a little bit more of the potential that we have in hardware right now, but I'm looking forward. I want to see a machine that has 10 times, 100 times the computational performance that we have right now, because then I can just go wild.
Maybe a question on that. Something I wondered. Do you think that if you put 80% of the details inside of an airplane, the last 20% become invisible? In terms of 3D modeling and texturing.
Yeah, but I don't think really that we are quite there yet where we could say that we are getting diminishing returns. We still do, you still do occasionally look at the occasional add-on. You see like crunchy lines along like a smoothened edge, which in a real aircraft would be like a smooth nacelle. And you can still see triangles. So I think we're still not quite there yet. And yeah, one of the things that we have to consider, especially with Bill next to me here, is thinking about we cannot, in the aircraft itself, we can't eat up all the performance that you have available because we got to leave something for the guys around us. I can't design an aircraft that's just going to be 5 million triangles and shading so complicated that the CPU is going to, or the GPU is going to chug. So I got to leave enough there so that other people's products are going to be able to shine through and not really impact performance so hard.
So switching gears again, so if you can share, maybe you're announcing it today, hint, hint, right? He's acting oblivious, but something's happening with the guy here. But What's something that you've wanted to do, a product or a project that was limited by the limitations of a platform that you would like to create? And if it's still that way, what could change that and make it possible for you?
Oh, weather radar. We're working on X-Plane, and X-Plane's, like, I'm going to be a little bit harsh here and dishing out some harsh truth, but X-Plane's atmosphere sucks. There's none of it there. I mean, it's basically like 3 pieces of data that sort of X-Plane imagines what the atmosphere is looking like. And I'm actually trying to write, we have the engine for an actual weather radar that does raycasting and, proper coverage and reflection computations. And then all of a sudden you get into, like, cool, we have this great engine, and now you hit a wall because all of a sudden all X-Plane gives you is like one picture, and you're trying to, like, the way that we're actually doing it right now is absolutely Stone Age. My dream of one day is X-Plane actually having a proper atmospheric model that develops over time. It's not just a static picture. And then that will impact the training environment quite significantly. At that point, we'll have our radar engine right there, ready to take advantage of it. But right now, we have basically a Ferrari that's running on, like, bike wheels. It's just great. We have a great engine, just no way to put the power down.
And, and the scenery adjunct to that is things like, I'd love to have a more dynamic world. I'd like to have a world where things changed over time, because we have the 3Ds. We have those 3 dimensions, right? Everything is locked down pretty good. They look realistic. But as I mentioned earlier with the whole issue with Portland, things don't really work in 4 dimensions. You don't have the time dimension built in. And I would love to have something where you could, like, feed the sim data on, like, a stream, where as things get built or as things change, as they close a runway to do, to pave or to do an extension, it would show up closed in the sim, and you'd basically have construction equipment around and all that.
So I guess, that's really an interesting thought, like you talk about a 4th dimension. Do you think that is it that there's no way to do that, or that you would have to create a way to do it from a data provider or something like that?
Well, there are ways to do some parts of it, but you're basically still not working in the 4th. You're working in doing incremental little updates and pushing them. It's a lot of work to do, and I guess it probably always will be, but it would be so cool if the sim could have a stream of information, just like it does for weather or for AI traffic and that sort of thing. If there's a stream of, like, the conditions on the ground, what was being worked on, what was open, what was closed, what new buildings have cropped up, things like that.
I think FSX on its own was a limitation. Still is today, in some respect. There are a lot of things that the platform was developed to do, and there are a lot of things the platform was clearly not developed to do. And I'm pretty sure if there's anyone from the ACES team here from Microsoft that worked on this thing, they probably didn't imagine the platform would be like it is today when they developed it. A lot of it, I'm so glad that Lockheed picked it up and make it what it is today. Well, in a sense, maybe we'd all be on X-Plane right now. Who knows? There are a lot of issues that we face during development of anything in this community, and that's like platform agnostic. On any platform, you'll have limitations. It's kind of part of the game, and the more you can build outside, if you have a concept you want to build outside of the simulator and just kind of connect just because you need that data, it's easy to develop. And when you start to integrate weather into the mix, the weather radar is kind of the best example you can have. It's trying to fetch data from the sim, and the sim is like, no, not getting it.
Well, that explains the specific issue is more like there's none of it there. Like there's nothing to get.
Yeah, well, that's a limiting factor on its own. So there are multiple things we have to go around, but it's kind of the part of the deal. And I think that if we're all here right now, it's because we kind of accepted that those were there and just accepted the fact that we need to go around those and find solution for those. That's kind of part of the challenge.
I would definitely agree with weather radar. Having the ability that a controller says, hey, you have moderate precipitation, 12 o'clock, 5 miles, that correlates with what's actually in the simulator. That would be really cool. So that's definitely a limitation. P3D not supporting 8.33 frequency spacing is a big problem because Europe uses that and X-Plane uses it. So if you P3D people, please support 8.33. By the way, that's the third digit in the frequency for those that are not familiar. It allows more frequencies to be used. US is on 25, which they already support that, and that was the standard 10 years ago, I think, and they've moved past that. So anyway, the other thing, and scenery would be really nice if all the scenery developers had the runways in the same place and the taxiways, so you don't have somebody taxiing on the grass, you know. But you know, that's the gateway. X-Plane Gateway really helps in that equation. I love that because people can go in and update those. Yeah.
That comes with a trade-off too. There are hot air balloons in Montreal.
Really?
Next to the runway. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. For the scenery gateway?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Hot air balloons, like they're in the air. There are a few of them parked next to the runway. Yeah. It's all kinds of crazy. But it's much better in terms of layout, though. Layout is good now. I agree with that.
So maybe following up a bit on Matt's comment here about the database, I think from our perspective, updating the navigational database within P3D and X-Plane it wasn't really meant for updates in this regard. We have some projects going on, but it's not as straightforward as within X-Plane, for example, where this has been modeled in a different way. So this is a limitation that we're working on.
So you guys are talking about hardware limitations, right? So there's obviously VR where, you know, I was a Vive user. I was a pretty early Vive adopter. I tried it. I liked the idea. I actually didn't get a headache from it. The problem for me was the simulators weren't pushing enough for me on high-end hardware to get what I needed to do that properly. So is there something that is happening right now in terms of optimizing that could get us there right now or soon?
So in X-Plane, the primary sort of driving force for improving rendering, essentially you're talking about rendering performance, and the primary driving factor there is they want to be used in Vulkan to essentially unload the single-threaded pipeline limitation that is right now in OpenGL, because OpenGL it's a product of the 90s. You can clearly, pretty much of the 80s, because you can clearly see it was never ever designed with its internals to ever drive more than one CPU. And all of a sudden we have machines that have dozens of them. So now what do we do? So clearly that is one way to improve performance. Another thing though is even if we completely unblocked the CPU side of the pipeline, if we optimize the ever-loving crap out of the thing, still I'm pretty sure if we wanted to get to sort of the resolutions that to be able to see the instruments clearly and to be able to see the environment clearly, that's just not the hardware right now to be able to drive it. Like, you probably have to run multi-GPU or some sort of thing, because if you want to have a 5K resolution per eye, drive that at 90 FPS, there's just no hardware out there to do that right now. So clearly there's going to have to be improvements in just pure silicon. We do need a lot of that. Hopefully they're going to be able to provide that.
RTX on.
Yeah, well, if you want frame rates, you definitely want RTX off.
I have nothing to say.
What was the question?
Basically, is there something on the software side of flightsim that could be improved substantially in terms of, well, for VR, but also for like performance in general, right? To get those
Immersion,
yeah.
My God. We're stuck with platforms that, well, it's kind of a good and a bad, right? We're stuck with platforms that have been designed and architected, is that a word? Like over a decade ago. And that's kind of required for what we do, because with the complexity of a simulator, you kind of have to build it, and that just takes time. But we see new platforms, all the new platforms that are coming on, you see DCS, you see Aerofly. Those are built on modern engines, and you run those on VR, and it's absolutely marvelous. But you get into complex sim like X-Plane and P3D that have been developed a very long time ago. Now X-Plane is kind of being transferred to Vulkan, which I think is going to help tremendously. And I hope P3D kind of follows those footsteps and kind of rewrites parts of its engine for performance, for VR. Yeah, I don't know that there's much we can do. I think it's just a matter of generations.
I'm just going to interject quickly here before they give this a shot. But in about 5 minutes, if you guys have questions, you can line up in the middle of the room, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for questions.
There's no April Fool's joke.
If I can add real quick, if you're going to come and line up, please go to the sides and to the back. Do not cut in front of the stage, please.
I would say getting off of SimConnect for P3D would be really nice. I know there's some other options, but X-Plane is more versatile of what you can get out of the simulator. So our client for P3D is strictly SimConnect. It would be nice to have some alternative options that are better. And hardware, I mean the server software, it would be nice if you zoom in from a far distance that we could still transmit like a 15 hertz update rate. But it's kind of limiting because if you have 50 of those airplanes and you're trying to do that, your sim's going to crash. So
We're not really limited by the simulator.
Maybe mobile devices. Do you see a performance difference with mobile devices?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mobile devices, the tablets have improved tremendously over the past years. So, I mean, what we can do now is tremendously increased performance compared to a few years back. The resolution, just having retina screens, making charts, for example, look amazing. This is definitely a huge improvement. So, of course, hardware outside of the simulator, we're really dependent on. Yep.
So kind of one more topic before we get into questions is what kind of advice can you offer to the people attending Flight Sim Expo and those who, maybe they're new to Flight Sim or they're experienced, but what should they do to get the most out of the conference and out of their sim?
They should walk around, talk to us. That's, I mean, just having conversations, talking about how you're simming, how you're using products, what you would like to see in the future. I mean, this is the essence of this conference. So just dialogue in the booth. So, yeah.
as I said before, every idea that we have or feature has come from people suggesting something. So having suggestions is super important. And don't be me. Don't sit in your booth all day and walk around. I mean, I never get to enjoy this conference fully because I'm always sitting in the booth. But you guys have the opportunity to hit every booth and talk to everybody. I would say don't waste too much time at each one. Spend a good managed time at each booth and listen to the developers and suggest things.
Be in the right seat room at 1:25 p.m.
You know, I'd say this is one of those rare opportunities you really don't get very often where you can sit face to face and talk to developers, fellow simmers, people who are really into the hobby, not through a forum, not online, but in an actual, real meet space environment here where we can talk to each other. So just if there's anything that you would like us to do, if there's anything you want to know, if there's any problem you've been having that's been bothering you for ages and you haven't been able to get a good answer on a forum, go to that developer and talk to them. We absolutely love talking to you, each and every one of you, and we'd love to hear anything you've got to say, positive or negative. It's much better to be able to connect face to face, and then you find out your answers and you go back and you tell all your friends that you do see face to face, I talked to the developer and here's what they told me, and you get a sense of who we are as people and we get to know who you are, and it makes the whole hobby better, I think.
Yeah, I got nothing to add. Everybody else has already made all my points.
All right, so do we have some folks in the middle here?
Hey, Will.
Hello.
What?
Go ahead.
Oh, so hey guys, my name is Nick. I'm with FS Elite, and my question is, with all these advancements that the sim has been bringing, like PBR and that sort of stuff, do you think some of the sim is actually advancing faster than the hardware is capable of producing? So like, if the performance we're able, or the stuff we're able to create is not able to be, or the hardware is not able to keep up with what we're able to create, that sort of stuff.
So I can only talk about the major platforms that I know about, which is primarily Expo, but I know a little bit of P3D, and I'd say hardware is actually advancing much faster than the software is capable of utilizing it right now, at least in the major sims. Some other projects maybe not, but I see the hardware has enormous amount of reserve power that we're just not tapping into because of, I wouldn't call it fundamentally bad software design, it's more like limited because of the age of the platforms. So it takes time to re-architect software, much longer than it takes time to buy new hardware, and I think there's definitely room for improvement on the hardware we already have, and it's pretty much, I can see it moving away faster than we're able to catch up right now, so there's going to have to be software changes, a lot of them.
And before he goes for it, I think that to add on to that, it's really because Flight Sim is unique in that we have our own challenges, and a lot of, you know, like AAA developers and studios, they have proprietary engines and they have all these modern accelerating tools that we don't have. So,
you know, I think for the longest time, having started, 15 plus years ago doing this, for the longest time, it really felt like the simulator, the software behind the sims was overdriving the hardware in the hope that the hardware would catch up at some point. And I feel like maybe it's because I've been dealing with products like FSX that are getting so old now, so the hardware like more than caught up with the software. But lately, I've had the feeling that it is, like you said, the other way around, where the software is struggling to catch up now. Because honestly, I hit a lot of situations when I'm simming, just in my development, my testing, where I think something should slow down the sim, and it's just flying. And my rig is not the latest and greatest hardware, but I'm just not having that many tech issues with the hardware anymore. So,
I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out, right? So just look at the frequencies of CPUs. How much extra gigahertz have we put on in the last 7-8 years? Almost none, like maybe a quarter. But how many extra cores have we put on? Oh man, we're talking 3 or 4 times more performance.
I don't have anything.
it's okay. You're chasing planes, right? So it's all good, right?
All right, good morning. I'm Brad Faviles from Jacksonville area. I have a two-part question. This is probably more on the management corporate side. So one of the things is, what's the relationship between the big companies and your add-ons? Is that a good relationship? Is it difficult? And then a follow-up question to that would be, as users of the simulators, one of the things that at least me I'm concerned about is the continuity of the add-ons long term, and I'm talking maybe 5-10 years in the future. When I buy an add-on, I want to make sure that it will be supported and it will continue for years to come. I don't want to buy it and then all of a sudden the company goes away because the developer moved on to other things. So what's your strategy as a company to move forward?
I can answer the first question. You asked about large companies in relationship to the add-ons, right? From our perspective, we're delivering data from the real aviation industry to the simulation community. So here, the essential component is this relationship we have with companies in the industry. Jeppesen now being our provider, having them on board with what we're doing is really the driving force to continuing development and listening to. I mean, we're having a good relationship with the simmers. The community is one aspect of this puzzle. The other aspect is the other end, where we have this interface towards the aviation industry. So having a good relationship on both ends is really, really essential. The second question I'll leave for someone else.
Because talking about the first question of how do we actually interact with the I think you mean the main platform vendors, right? So basically, people who are making the simulator itself. I can only speak for X-Plane, and I'd say Laminar is extremely receptive to feedback. They might not always be they might not always do changes that we want, but overall, like I've had many a phone call with them where we're working interactively through a problem, and they are quite helpful in that. In terms of long-term support, it's kind of a complicated question because you really have to view the simulator, at least the main platforms, when you have to really view them less as a single product and more as an operating system. They're just an operating environment that has a bunch of base features, that has a basic API for interacting with third-party software, and then we have a whole ton of third-party software running on top. Like I've never seen anybody, I'm pretty sure nobody here at the conference is running their simulator vanilla, just purely the way it comes out of the box. Everybody's got a crap load of plugins and add-ons on it. And there, it's really up to we have a sort of plan to support the product for a certain amount of time, but if somebody pulls out the rug from under us and changes the API fundamentally such that it breaks an existing add-on, then the only suggestion I can give you there is just don't update the simulator. Run the software that you got it with, and then you'll be able to run it for pretty much all eternity. But it's an unfortunate reality. If you want to have extra features, you got to do some breakage at some point. We can't support software 20 years into the past while still getting new features. It just doesn't work like that. The software will be completely unwieldy at that point. I mean, look at Windows.
FSX.
Yeah, especially FSX. I want to address that because I understand the need to try, you've got an investment in add-ons. You want them to last for a while. You want to be able to enjoy them for years. But if you bought, for instance, a scenery for FSX, it's still going to work in FSX. If it worked before, it'll work now, as long as you haven't added more add-ons to your FSX that break it. But just because you're still using FSX, not you obviously particularly, but it doesn't mean that the numbers of people using FSX are still going to support future development for it. So at some point, every company has to decide, okay, it's time to sunset a particular platform and move it aside and focus on the new tech, just so we can keep delivering interesting new products that have the new tech that people are really clamoring for. And that means necessarily putting some of the old stuff beside and letting it sort of fade into the background.
I think we've seen it with the P3D switch from 32 to 64-bit. It was kind of the worst possible scenario for everyone was freaking out. It was like the, in 2000 when they thought every computer would crash at the turn of the year. That was kind of it, right? Didn't really happen. Well, yeah, it did break a lot of add-ons, but most of the important ones got transferred over, and the developers were kind of ready for that to happen as well. And it was a good transition. So I guess if you have a good user base for an add-on, the chances of it being updated down the road are much higher, unless of course the developer is no longer able to update it. It's not something I'm particularly worried about, but I can understand how people can be worried about that kind of thing, specifically for kind of niche add-on and stuff that we want, but might not be super mainstream. But yeah. Yeah.
And if no one else has anything to add to that, I would say you're talking about the relationship between the big, you say the big company, it's really the main developer supporting the base, right? Because in Flight Sim, it's really different where you have the main companies are the base, but everything else is these people and all the people that are in that hall. All the people that are in that hall make that all come together. I don't think anyone in this room would, unless all your goal is to go on X-Plane and fly a 172 to get your PPL and do nothing else, that your goal is to simply get a flight sim and that's all you're gonna do. Because of that relationship between the big three or whatever you wanna call it and all of these people, it's possible. As far as support, I like what you guys said about the transition from 32 to 64-bit. I came in right after that, so I was lucky, but it seemed like it was a painful process.
Yeah, you have to really view these platforms more like operating systems with software running on top. Nobody buys an operating system to run solitaire till the end of time. We actually purchase some useful software that we want to run on top.
Windows XP? Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm getting back into simming, and I've noticed that the structure of the community has gotten a lot more complex. It's pretty hard to get into and figure out what's the right things to do. So as developers, what are your thoughts on how to structure the community in a way that will lend itself to increasing the community, which may help with the real-world pilot shortage, I feel?
I think it's actually the other way around. The pilot shortage is driving people in the community. Training on Flight Simulator has exploded in the past few years. It's way cheaper to fly now on sims than just to rent a real plane and fly. So a lot of just trainee pilot will be flying on simulators. When I did my PPL, I said that to my instructor. I was like, I did a lot of flight sim. He was not buying it. But then I got out at 45 hours, which is the minimum requirements in Canada. So flight sim really, really helps to train you. It also gives you bad habits, and that's kind of what flight training is for. But it really, really helps. So I think a lot of influx of people inside of this community, and I think part of the reason why this event is so big nowadays is in part because of flight simulation training. And it got people in.
I could probably answer a lot of this one. I fly next to a captain, and he's like, we'll come into New York, and he's like, I said, I pre-tuned the frequency, and he's like, how did you know that? And I'm like, well, I don't really go into detail. But I'm like, I just, I read their SOP. He's like, you read what? Yeah, the N90 SOP, yeah, I read it. But yeah, there's a huge opportunity with the pilot shortage, absolutely. I think there's a case study you could do on most of these people that, younger guys that have gone through the ranks from flying online, and maybe they still continue to do it, but not failing check rides. I mean, these guys, one of the guys at our booth is at Envoy right now. He's never failed a check ride. He's like the perfect candidate because of flight sim. I'm convinced it's because of flight sim. And there's a lot of those people now that you could actually go back and look at them and say, these guys are saving the airline a lot of money. So flight sim is absolutely huge for it. Just don't talk about it too much while you fly.
It's kind of a can of worms, right?
It gets a little weird. They're like, you do what?
Yeah. What, for fun?
Yeah. You do
Not
what at home?
Not in P3D, right? Not for fun.
You can't.
Hi guys, my name is Taylor. I'm an Envoy Airlines cadet from Austin, longtime simmer. My question is for the whole panel, but particularly for those of you that maybe don't have as much of an aviation background or were coming from a different career. What is the most unique challenge to develop for the aviation community as opposed to maybe just the traditional, more gaming community? And what are some of the quirks and aspects that you've had to learn as you've been developing for a very unique kind of niche market?
So I'm not from the aviation community, or I'm not simmer or pilot, but we develop tools for navigation. In this aspect, I mean, it's a game, but it's very serious. There are so many protocols, for example, and rules, regulations regarding navigation that you can see it as a limitation, but it's also a good structure. I mean, it's a set of rules how you are due to perform certain aspects of a flight. That it's a common language that pilots speak. So this is it's sort of a limitation that you can't do anything in a navigation app, but it's also a nice set of standards and rules that sort of can guide you towards an app or a system that is still understandable, even though it's maybe new, has cool features, but it still has this core set of rules that makes it understandable. So I mean, I come from a different domain, But since aviation has this really strict way of performing pretty much every task, it's easy to actually understand the process. So this has helped me. I'm still not able to fly, but I definitely understand how a pilot workflow is.
You're seated next to the regulation itself. You're seated next to the regulation itself.
Right.
Balancing realism versus going to take out the trash. That's an important balance that you have to achieve. How realistic do you really want it to be? I mean, can you leave the cockpit and go make dinner? I mean, those are things you have to balance. So you can't be totally realistic, that's for sure.
I know, coming from a completely non-aviation background, although I've always loved aircraft and always been really interested in them, when you come into it through a scenery doorway, you're basically, when you start, I think an awful lot of us are just into it because we like the graphics. We like to do interesting art and all that. And that'll take you up to a point. You can do a few small bush airports or whatever and be pretty loosey-goosey with how things are laid out. But when you start working up into the international airport range, I've really had to be on my toes, because we got some seriously pedantic people in this community who will hold you to every little, the spacing of the lines, and everything has to be there. You make sure every taxiway sign is there. So I've had to learn an awful lot about the technicalities of putting together airports. It's been an education for sure.
Spacing of taxi lights and stuff like that.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you had an unanswered question, these guys will all be around the floor. And if I could just get a round of applause for their time, but also the Flight Sim Expo.